Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for.
Oh,
Can you hear me? Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all so much for coming. I think there might be some people. And we are sorry for starting this session late. But thank you all for coming today. We appreciate it so much, and thank you to the House of Nubia for hosting this for our Sudani community. My name is Reem Muhammad Ali. That is my full name. And I graduated from Harvard University last year, where I studied government and computer science. And I also did a specialization in modern standard Arabic.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Zeinab Mukhtar. Mukhtar. And I am a junior at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, studying public policy, statistics, and environmental science. And we're very excited to welcome you guys today. Thank you guys for bearing with us and being patient. And we'll go ahead and get started without further ado.
Okay, so we'll start off with kind of the simple and big questions. Why host a college information session? So the college application process is one that's really hard, especially if you don't have older siblings or your parents didn't go to college in this country. And I know for a lot of people in the Sudani community, you're likely first generation. And so as people who've already been through this process and who've had others help us along the way, we wanted to be the ones to pass on this knowledge to other people within our community and kind of give back to the people who gave us so much. And so yeah, we are here as kind of your older siblings to offer any sort of advice or assistance that you may need. And so just to kind of briefly give a run-up show, what we'll do is we'll maybe present for about an hour, and for the half hour to 45 minutes left, I think that might be sooner, but for the half hour to 45 minutes left, then we'll open the session up for any questions that you all may have and answer those, inshallah.
Okay. Yeah. The voice is kind of crazy.
Okay.
Hello? Okay. So I'm gonna give like an umbrella overview into like what colleges look for. That's the big question that you guys all have. What do I have to do to prepare myself to make sure that colleges see me and that I stand out? But the answer is not like a one cent answer. There's a lot that goes into it, into making sure that you position yourself as a competitive student, as someone that's academically rigorous, but also as someone who's gonna positively contribute to their community. So we're gonna go over this into detail in the presentation, but just to give you an idea, we're gonna talk about your GPA, that's the big number that everyone seems to care about. We're gonna talk about what courses you should take, what's the difference between AP, IB, honors, regular courses. We're gonna talk about the big standardized tests, including the SAT and the ACT. We're gonna talk about awards and honors and what it takes for you guys to make sure that you have those in your application. And then we're gonna also dive into the more creative parts of the application, which include your personal essay, and that's the big essay that the admissions officers are gonna read. And then we're gonna also talk about recommendation letters, how to form a good relationship with your teachers, with your counselors, to make sure that you have a good recommendation letter. And then we're also gonna talk about beyond just classes, but like what can you do outside of the classroom, extracurriculars, sports, and things like that.
Okay. So when do you start planning for your college applications? The answer is honestly as soon as you enter high school, which may seem like it's early, but the reason for that is because everything from your grades to your extracurriculars to your volunteer activities, colleges look at that from the 9th grade all the way through the 12th grade. So starting from your freshman year, that's when you really begin the preparation for the college application process. And so we'll start off first with coursework and grades, which is probably, I think, the most important part of the process, but not the entire part. And so colleges honestly like to see that you are taking whatever the most difficult coursework that your school offers is. And so for a lot of people, that's AP or IB classes, and we'll get a little bit more into what that is. But essentially, they'd rather see you get like a B maybe in an AP or an IB course than they would you see an A in a normal course, because they want to see that you are challenging yourself and that you're able to handle what college coursework is going to look like as well. And so in terms of IB versus AP, if you're asking the question of which one is better for colleges, the answer is that it doesn't really matter which one you do. So I did the International Baccalaureate System, which is IB,
And I did the advanced placement system, which is like the AP. And like being said, there's really no right answer. Every school offers something different. So I went to Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia, and my school simply didn't offer IB courses, but we did have the AP system, and that is what pretty much everybody in my school took. So you have to ask yourself, what courses do my school offer?
Yeah, and I went to Edison High School in Alexandria, Virginia, and they only offered the IB system, and so that's what I ended up taking. And so just to explain a little bit more about what IB is, or what International Baccalaureate is, it's essentially an international system, so it exists both in the United States and in countries outside of the United States. And it's a very comprehensive system that you start in your 11th grade, so you can take IB courses in your 11th and 12th grade, and it's called the diploma program. If you end up, you can either do where like you take individual IB classes, or you can choose to pursue an IB diploma. So when you graduate, you'll have 2 diplomas, your regular high school one and one that's an IB one as well. And so what this essentially is you take classes in things like IB math, IB English, IB, you have to do a language, so I did IB Arabic, and all of these different types of things, and then you also do like IB business or IB art or whatever it is. And if you choose to do the full diploma, then you'll also have 3 additional components. The first one of these is that you're going to do in your senior year of high school a 4,000-word essay called the extended essay about any topic of your choosing. You're going to do an additional course that's called Theory of Knowledge, so it's about additional 3 hours. I think you take it for 1 year. And then you're going to do something that's called the CAS system, which is the complete application. And so you would do like additional volunteer hours, you have to do additional creativity hours, and you have to do additional activity hours. So it's an entirely comprehensive system, and if your school offers IB, I would highly recommend you talk to your counselors, you sort of get involved and try to figure out what it is, and determine what's right for you. If it looks right for you to take individual classes, or if it looks right for you to do the full diploma, because either one of them is fine.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the AP program. I know a lot of schools in the Northern Virginia area offer AP classes. So there's some schools that will just offer individual AP courses that you can take. And there's other schools, like my school, that had the AP Capstone Diploma Program, which basically allows you to graduate with another diploma, similar to the IB one. The AP is more common in the United States. It's founded by the College Board, which we'll also talk a lot about. It's a very big educational company. But you essentially, like, in order to, you can position yourself in a competitive way depending on what your school offers. So if your school only offers AP classes, take as many of those as you can. AP Econ, AP Bio, AP Chem, like the opportunities are endless, and those are really great ways to show colleges that you can not only take a regular class, but you can take a college level class, and that really shows that you're ready for college level work, right? So if your school offers the AP Capstone Diploma Program, I would also highly recommend doing that program. It's really fulfilling. You take a certain number of classes, and you have to score a 3 or above in those AP courses. So I took classes like AP Econ and AP Human Geography and other really cool courses. And then you also have a research component, which is similar to the IB program, and that includes taking AP Seminar and AP Research. And that basically prepares you for college level research. What does it take to do research? Because a lot of these universities are not just places where you go in and take classes, but you're learning from professors who are doing research in really cool topics and really cool fields. So you want to make sure that you position yourself as someone who knows how to research, who knows what questions our society is wondering about or asking about, right? And that shows that you're not only good at taking tests and scoring well on exams, but that you're also good at thinking beyond the classroom, right? Like, how can I positively contribute to the educational community as a whole, right? To academia in general. So that's just kind of an umbrella overview into IB and AP. And again, it really goes down to what does my school offer? As long as you're exhausting and you're exhausting all the options that you have in your respective school, and you're taking as many IB or AP courses that you can, that's amazing. That's what you can control as a student. But you can't control whether your school offers IB or AP and how many courses are offered at you. So you just need to make sure that you ask the questions to your counselor, what courses and programs are offered to me, and how can I make sure that I take as many of those as I can.
Yeah, and schools will also give you a full list of the catalog of what's available to you, and they'll explain these things a lot more. And so you can always talk to your counselor, you can always talk to your teachers, and try to figure out whether this is a good system for you or not. As somebody who did IB, I would highly recommend it. I would also caveat that it's a lot of work, and so to make sure that this is something that works for you. And so what are the benefits of taking IB or AP other than just colleges caring about it? So there's two main benefits. The first one is, I guess I'll go into the second one first, but if you score high enough on the exams, so for example, the IB exam is graded out of a 7. So if you score a 6 or a 7, some schools even take a 5, on a lot of these exams, what colleges will do is that they'll actually give you course credit for it. So what that means is that, for example, let's say I got a 6 or a 7 on the IB English exam. When I go to college, I don't need to take the introductory English courses that a lot of people take. And so some schools, for example, like George Mason University or George Washington University, or a lot of schools in the area will take this credit, and it means that you're able to skip an entire semester of college essentially, and you can graduate early and you can save a lot of money on courses as well. The other advantage to this is that it adds a 1-point boost to your GPA, which is essentially your grade point average. So most people know that their GPA is graded out of a 4.0, right? And so if I get an A, that's worth like a 4.0. If I get an A minus, that's worth like a 3.7, and the scale goes down like that. So that is called your unweighted GPA. And so that's solely based on what you score in a class. So whether that's an A or an A minus or a B plus or whatever. There's something else once you get to high school called your weighted GPA. And this is basically based on if you take an honors class, an AP class, or an IB class. And so honors classes are less difficult than AP and IB classes, but they're more difficult than like the normal level of the class. And so for honors classes, you will get a 0.5 boost to your GPA. So let's say I got I scored like a 98 in my I scored like a 98 in my algebra honors class. So what that means, that translates to a 4.0, but because it's an honors class, they'll actually put it into my GPA as a 4.5. So it'll give you that boost. For IB and AP classes, they add a 1-point boost to your GPA. So if I get something that's equal to an A, they will factor that in as a 5.0. So what that means is that you're basically able to get a GPA that's above a 4.0, which is really important, especially when you're applying for kind of more difficult or colleges that have more selective acceptance rates. Then they like to see that you have a pretty high weighted GPA, because it means that you've taken the most difficult courses that are available to you at your school. It means that you're able to handle the type of work that you'll be encountering in college.
Oh, and just one more thing. I think it depends on the county. I know Fairfax County gives you a 0.5 boost for your GPA if you take honors courses. Arlington County, which is where I went to school, doesn't offer that. So make sure you ask your counselor that question and get like a confirmation so you know.
Yes. Okay, now we'll move on to standardized testing, which is probably the second most important part of your application. And so standardized tests essentially break down to 4 types of tests. The first one is the PSAT, the second one is the SAT/the ACT, and the last one is SAT subject tests. And so we'll break down each one of these. But the PSAT essentially stands for the Practice Standardized Advanced Test. And so what this is I'm sure most of you have probably heard of the SAT, which is just this, the standardized test that you essentially take for colleges. But what the PSAT is, it's also known as the NMSQT, which is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. And so it's like a practice version of the SAT. The SAT is scored out of 1600, and the PSAT is scored out of 1520. And they give it to all students in the United States in their junior year of high school. And so that's your 3rd year of high school. And so it's given in October of your junior year. And basically what it does is it prepares you for the actual SAT. It has 4 sections. 2 of them cover math, and 2 of them cover like reading and writing topics. And then it's scored out of the 1520, and though the scores don't actually count as part of your college application, so colleges will not consider these scores, they do help put you on the map. So you have the option on the test, if you think you're gonna do well, to select to send your scores to colleges. On this basis, colleges will then start sending you like emails and brochures and stuff like that, asking you to tour their college. It can also make you eligible for a lot of scholarships. So that's why it's called the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. There's something called the National Merit Scholarship Corporation. And essentially what they do is they have like a certain percentage in each state. You'll want to search up what the percentage is for the state of Virginia. I don't actually know it off the top of my head. But if you score high enough, it means that you're eligible for a lot of different types of scholarships that they have on their platform. So in terms of when you start thinking about preparing for the SAT, think about preparing for the PSAT first, or the like do it early on. Don't just think that this is something that you're gonna take in your senior year of high school or when you're about to start applying to colleges. I would highly recommend that you actually start preparing from your freshman and your sophomore years of high school. So that's your first and your second year of high school, because doing that type of preparation and studying for these tests is going to prepare you for what it's actually like to take the SAT or the ACT, which are the scores that eventually do get sent to colleges. And then in terms of just covering the SAT or the ACT, these are required for any type of college that you apply to, or most types of colleges that you apply to. Some colleges did, during COVID, went test optional, which means that you didn't have to submit a score. But a lot of those colleges have now reversed their policies, so you'll want to double check. And even if a school is test optional, submitting your scores really helps you be eligible for a lot more scholarships, and which is super important when we're thinking about paying for colleges, which are very expensive. And so it doesn't matter which one that you do. I did the SAT and Zeinab did the ACT, and so she'll talk more about that. The SAT, as I mentioned before, is scored out of 1,600. It has 2 mandatory sections. One is the reading and writing section, and one of them is the math section. Then there's an optional additional writing section, which is like an essay. You don't have to do that. You can choose to do it if you want to, you don't. And then the advantage of the SAT is that it's essentially super scored for most colleges. What this means is you can take the SAT multiple times. Personally, I took it 3 times, and you can take it as many times as you want. Most schools recommend that you don't do it more than 5 maximum though, because it is an expensive test and it does cost money. But let's say in the first time that you take this, you scored maybe like a 700 on the reading section and you scored like a 600 on the math section, right? So this is the first time that you take the test. Both sections are scored out of 800, and that's what makes up the 1,600 score. Then the second time you take the test, maybe you score like a 600 on the reading, so you got 100 points lower, but you score like a 700 on the math, so 100 points higher. What they'll do is they'll take your reading test from the first test that you took and your math test from the second test that you took, and together you get a higher score than you did on either one of those exams. So now you have 1,400 altogether, and you can use that to apply to colleges. So most colleges do this. I will say some schools do require you to submit all of your scores. So for example, Georgetown University is one that I know where you have to submit all of your scores. But essentially, this is the advantage of the SAT. And when you're thinking about studying for this test, there's a lot of test preparation courses out there, but they're typically super expensive and not affordable for most people. What I recommend, and what was the best resource for me, was Khan Academy. It's completely like 100% free. What you'll do is you'll take a diagnostic test first, so you'll just take a test, it'll show you your score, and then based on that, and based on the sections that it sees that you maybe score lower on, it'll design like a personalized curriculum for you, and you're able to say, how much time do I want to spend studying every day? So for me, when I was getting closer to my test, I would spend 30 minutes to an hour studying every day for the SAT on Khan Academy. And it would like train me on the questions that I was maybe weaker in or had a harder time in. And that's what I found to be the best resource for me now.
Yeah, I think Reem did a really good job of like covering everything. I personally applied to college during COVID, so I tried to register for the SAT multiple times. It ended up getting canceled because of COVID, but I was able to take the ACT once or twice. The difference between the SAT and the ACT is that the ACT includes an additional science section. So if you're really good at science and it's your strong suit, I would highly recommend you check out the ACT, start studying for that, because again, you want to make sure that you take a test that like kind of corresponds to what you know you're good at, right? So it's also 3 sections and an additional writing section. So there's math, there's science, and there's reading/writing. That's like multiple choice. So the thing with these tests, again, Khan Academy, a really great resource. You can also find a lot of these SAT and ACT books at your local library. Like, I would highly recommend steering clear of bookstores and going straight to where you can find them. I also had a lot of counselors at my school who had them sitting on their bookshelves, so you could also borrow them from there. Main point, like this process does seem super expensive. SAT and ACT exams are expensive. The books, the studying does seem expensive, but there are options to make this more affordable. So in terms of the SAT and ACT, if you are eligible for free and reduced lunch, or if you are from like a low-income family, it is totally okay for you to request a fee waiver, and this basically means that you can take these exams without having to pay anything. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you're asking your counselor the right questions. If you're from a low-income family, go to your counselor and tell them, I need a fee waiver. How do I do this? How do I set this all up? Because you don't want to think that you can't take the exam simply because you can't afford it. And this also includes like the college application process in general. It's it seems expensive, but there are options to make it more affordable, and ways to just make sure that you do it right. And then just another reminder about the SAT and the ACT. It is made to seem that like this is everything. It's really not. Like this is a component of your application. Colleges are not gonna look at your SAT and ACT score and say if your SAT or ACT score are too low, they're gonna throw you to the side. That's simply not true anymore. They really do emphasize that they take a holistic approach to your application. They wanna know who you are, but they do also care about your ACT and SAT score. So don't let this be like a discouraging factor. Use this as a really good way to show colleges that you're really smart and that you know how to take a test and that you're academically ready for college, but don't let this be your end-all be-all, and it goes on both extremes. So there are people who have 36s, which is the highest score on the ACT, and 1600s on the SAT, but don't get into Harvard and Yale. Like that's a total possibility. So keep that in mind. Remember, right now we're thinking about crafting an application. We're talking about positioning yourself as a really great student for these colleges, academically and socially, which we'll talk about a little bit. So
Yeah, and I'll just stress this. Does this work? Okay. I'll just stress this as well. You do not need a perfect score at all.
Yeah.
I went to Harvard. I did not get a perfect score on my SAT. I retook it multiple times. All of my friends that I know also did not get perfect scores on their SAT. So don't stress about that at all.
Yeah.
The last thing that we'll talk about is SAT subject tests. So these are, I think, less common nowadays, but certain schools, for example, like Harvard or Yale or Princeton, Columbia, whatever it is, some of these schools like to see you take these tests. Not necessary at all, but what they are is essentially like an additional exam you can take. Each one of them is graded out of 800, and they do cover them in multiple subjects. So there's like, I think there's like they're also called like the SAT2. So they have one for like biology, they have one for language, they have one for literature, they have one for math and different levels of math, world history. So these cover a lot of different subjects, and it essentially shows that you have mastered the subject really, really well. Now for these, I will say that there's a trick to taking them. Typically, you shouldn't submit for an SAT2 test, or don't take the test if you think you're gonna score below a 700 on this. If you will score above a 700, then it is good to send, and you should send it off. But if you don't, then I would recommend that you don't bother with it. It's not a really important part of the process. I took a couple of these, but most people I know haven't taken these.
okay, so we're gonna dive into the resume, which is like, basically the idea of a resume is that when you give somebody this piece of paper, it's able to give you an all-encompassing view of like who this person is, where they've studied, what their extracurriculars are, and what they can bring to the table, right? So that's basically what your application to college is. It's you're giving these college admissions officers an umbrella overview of who you are as a student. So there's a lot of components to your resume, but the main branches that we're going to talk about today are extracurriculars, your leadership positions, your volunteering and your work, and then awards and other honors. So I'll dive into extracurriculars. A big misconception that a lot of people have is that going to college is all about studying. That's true, that's a huge component, but when you're in this college campus, you're also a part of the community. You're also a part of like this huge network of students that are trying to make the world a better place. So they want to see that that's something that you're already doing in high school, right? So beyond getting good grades in high school, which is, again, very important and should be your #1 priority, you should also think about, what am I doing outside of the classroom? What clubs am I a part of? What sports am I a part of? Like, what is it that I can show colleges I can bring to a college campus, right? So it's super important to show colleges that you're a well-rounded student, that you're able to handle intense courses like AP and IB classes, but that you're also able to be an athlete on a football team, or be a member of your local Muslim Student Association, or a volunteer organization, right? Because that shows colleges that you are academically rigorous, but you're also really involved socially. In terms of like just practical tips for the application, it's much more about quality than quantity. So you'll meet a lot of people who join a lot of clubs, but they don't actually create a positive impact in any of those clubs. You need to make sure that like when you're choosing the clubs that you're a part of, you genuinely choose those that you're interested in, right? So for me, I was involved in Wakefield's Muslim Student Association, also Model UN, we both did Model UN, and there's a lot of other clubs that exist, and I found that to be the best way for me to be involved at Wakefield, especially during COVID, since my time was cut short a little bit. And I was able to use those clubs to craft a story and tell college admissions officers when I go to Duke, I'm also going to join the Muslim Student Association at Duke. And that's exactly what I did. I started as president of Duke MSA last year, and it was a very fulfilling experience. But I was able to show the college admissions officers that I did this in high school, thus I'm going to come to college and I'm going to do it even better, right? Because Duke, for example, is a huge university with like more than 300 student groups and thousands of students, and they want students to actually positively impact their community and be a part of the college campus. So it's beyond just like your academics, it's also like, what am I doing outside the classroom? And again, it's all about quality. Do not get into like the trap of like joining 50 clubs. Like, that's an exaggeration, of course, but make sure that you're choosing your like the clubs that you're a part of wisely, and really ask yourself, why am I joining this club? And make sure that every single year you're a part of it, from freshman to senior year, that you're actually making a positive impact every year. And you dive into
I think Zeinab said most of it for extracurriculars. That's exactly what it is. It's important to show that you are, at the end of the day, with your application, what you're doing is creating a story about yourself and who you are, right? So like your essay or your scores or whatever it is are not just enough to show your personality. You show that through your extracurriculars and the stuff that you choose to spend your time on outside of school as well. And so these are different for every single person. There are some that are kind of popular, so like people hear that like a lot of people like do Model United Nations, for example, or Community Service Club or something like that. I did Model United Nations because I love this type of stuff. I love talking about like politics and things like that, and I ended up studying government in college, so that's why I did it. But if you don't like that, if that's not right for you, if it's not something that you enjoy, then don't get involved with it just because, you know, it's a popular name. Do the stuff that you actually care about. And so I did a lot of different types of extracurriculars when I was in high school. Some of my most important ones were the Muslim Student Association, Model United Nations. I was part of Young Democrats when I was in high school, maybe not now with the political situation, but back then I was part of it. And then there were other things too, like I also played volleyball from when I was in 4th grade all the way until high school. And so this is something that I really enjoyed. It's something that I dedicated a lot of time to, and it kind of showed in my application that this is something I was very, very consistent in, not just something that I did for the sake of my application. Another thing that I did as well, and this is something you can do if you find that you have a gap in your school, is I founded my own club. And so mine was called Project Humanity, and what we did was like a lot of charity work for other countries, or we would raise awareness about crises that were happening around the world, especially in the Middle East and Africa. And that was kind of something that I was very passionate about and something that I continued after high school as well. But you can really choose to do any extracurricular that you like. Maybe I did volleyball, Zeinab ended up doing track and like running in high school, and so it's different for every single person, and that's what I think is important. Like, do the things that you care about, the things that you'll actually enjoy spending time in, and the things that you think you will do well. And then leadership. Oh yeah.
Oh, the house. Oh, so sorry guys. The House of Nubia is also a really great extracurricular opportunity. So they have like a Nubian Youth Council, and then also for like high school to college level students, like upper high school, there's also another youth group. So like, get involved at the House of Nubia, take leadership, talk to movement heads and all the other organizers, and see what you as youth can do, because this is like a huge, huge initiative. Like, you guys are very blessed to have a space like this. Make this space your own, and like use that as a way also to show colleges that, hey, like I'm Nubian and I'm doing this and all this stuff in the Northern Virginia area. So
yeah, and I think that actually, so should we jump leadership positions? You kind of mentioned it a little bit, but that ties more into the volunteering and work section as well. So volunteering is really, really important, and it shows that you care a lot about your community. And most schools will actually require you to have volunteer hours before you graduate. I think it's minimum 50 hours for most schools, depending on the type of diploma. So like if you want an advanced diploma, then they'll require that you have some level of volunteer hours. Now, people do all sorts of things for volunteering. Some people volunteer at like the hospitals, so like Fairfax Hospital or like Alexandria Hospital or whatever it is, they all have like volunteer programs, but those are really hard to get into. Other people volunteer at like nursing homes, or they do, there's like kind of other things, like they do like park cleanups and stuff like that. So your school will typically send you when there's a volunteer opportunity, and you can do this type of stuff. Or you can go out, like another really good thing to do that Zeinab was just talking about is to find something in your community that you really care about. So for example, the House of Nubia is one of these, where you can volunteer here, you can help them when they're hosting events and stuff like that. And you can actually end up counting these towards the hours that you have to do in high school. Other things too are like volunteer at your masjid. Maybe it's during Ramadan. Maybe it's during like Jumu'ah prayers during the summer or something like that. Or like figure out what sort of events that they have and you could volunteer there too. And there are so many masjids in this area. If you live around here, then there's like Adam Center. If you live closer to Alexandria and those areas, then there's the Mass Community Center. And they're always looking for volunteers. They're always looking for people to get involved. And so all of you can do that. Or you can go out and create your own volunteer opportunity as well. So for me, a lot of my application and a lot of what I ended up doing in college and after college is work that's involved with Sudan. And so the summer after, I think before my junior year, we were in Sudan, and I decided to do my volunteer opportunity there at this center in Khartoum that was called Khartoum Treasure Home. It was a center for children with disabilities, like a non-profit center there. And so figure out something that's like unique to you, figure out something that you maybe care about. There are so many events that you can volunteer at, and so there's so many opportunities for you in this area. We'll actually go back to like leadership positions really quickly because that's kind of important. So if you're thinking about, or like maybe your dream school is a more selective college, so let's say your dream school is somewhere like Harvard or Columbia or Duke or anything like that. Zeinab was saying this earlier, but I think it's important to stress it. What colleges want to see is not just that you're part of these clubs, but that you're taking leadership in them. Because these are schools that want to see you and want to create leaders. And so these are the types of people that they're looking for to join in the first place, or to when they're applying. And so showing that, for example, like at my high school, I was president of the Muslim Student Association, or like I was also like a part of the board for Model United Nations, and I helped organize a lot of events at my high school. So when I went to college, I ended up doing those same exact things. Like I was the president of the Harvard Islamic Society and stuff like that. And so they want to see that from high school, you've already started this foundation, because then they expect this is the type of person we are admitting to our college. This is what they're going to do here. They're going to lead to a positive contribution to our college campus. And yeah.
And then just to dive into the last thing, which is awards, like this is a really big question. It's like, how do I get an award? What do I need to do? That can look different for everyone. For some people, they're athletes and they get really amazing track or soccer or volleyball awards, and they can include that. For me personally, I was really involved in science fair every year, and when you go to like regionals, they'd have a bunch of cool organizations that would come and see your project and then award you really cool awards that you can include in your application. Again, that's just one idea. There are so many ways you can get an award, and I think we both got the National Water Quality Association Award. So that's a really, really great way to show that, like, again, it showed that I was really interested in water quality and that I was very interdisciplinary, and I would bring that with me to college. So again, that's a really important thing that you can include. That's just how it looked like for us, but it can look like something different for you guys. And it's about really taking that initiative and talking to your counselor, talking to your teachers. There's a really cool program called National History Day. I think I would highly recommend you guys talk to your history teachers about. And they have really cool competitions about, you do like your own individualized project, research project on like something in history that you're really interested in. And they also have regional competitions and state competitions. So do your research, watch YouTube videos, like ask people about like what they did, and use that to kind of guide you to see how you can get an award that you can include in your section. And there's also honor societies that exist in a lot of high schools. My school has History Honor Society, Math Honor Society. These are kind of like in between awards / honors / clubs. So they're groups of students who are really dedicated to, for example, history or math, or even there's something called the National Honor Society, and you have to maintain a certain level of like a GPA and volunteer hours every single semester. But that kind of shows colleges that like you have excelled in the sphere of history or in the sphere of math, and you kind of earned that honor. That kind of counts as an award / honor. So would highly recommend, again, what I'm trying to prove right now is that you guys need to do your own individual deep dives into number one, what am I interested in? What makes me passionate? What makes me tick? And number two, how can I translate that into an award? If you're really interested in math, the National Math Honor Society has these really cool math competitions that they host every single year, and they're really intense, and they're a great way to get an award. If you're really interested in science, look at science fair, take that initiative, talk to your science teacher. Again, ask yourself those questions and make that into action so you can actually see the results that you want in your application.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that awards are not just through your school. So for example, like when I did volleyball, I went to 2 different I went to 2 different schools for high school. So for one of them, I was part of my school team. For the other one, because I joined late, I couldn't be on the school team. But what I did is instead I played for recreational organizations. So in our area, there's like the BRYC, the Braddock Road Youth Club, and they have like a lot of sports teams. And so whenever we play on those, we ended up winning awards, and these were team awards, but you can still include those on your application because at the end of the day, you're part of this team. There's also awards outside of that. For example, let's say that your masjid hosts Quran competitions, you participate in this, you can include that you won in the Quran competition on your application. Another really big one that I would encourage all of you to get involved in is DC Mist, which is essentially the Muslim Interscholastic Tournament. And so what this is it's a tournament that's held for all of the Muslim students in high schools in this area, and they hold it every single year. I think this year maybe it happened in April, or yeah, I want to say it happened in April. And so it has so many different types of competitions. Like they have, if you're interested in art, they have art competitions. If you're interested in cooking, they have that. If you're interested in sports, they have sports competitions. There's stuff like Quiz Bowl, which like essentially tests you on different types of topics. There's stuff like Knowledge Test, where you read a book and then you do like a test for it. They also have like Science Fair. They have short film, they have community service. So many different types of awards that you're essentially eligible for. And this competition, it's really fun. You get to meet Muslim students from all over this area. It's typically 3 days, and so you begin preparing for it from early. But like DC Mist is a huge opportunity for Muslim students in this area because it's a smaller pool of students. You go with your school, and you're eligible for so many awards that will put you on the map for colleges at the end of the day.
Okay, recommendation letters. This one also can seem really difficult, but you guys are already making a lot of progress in that right now. If you're in high school, recommendation letters, so most schools will require, it depends on the school, but like, for example, Duke University and a lot of other rigorous universities require 2 recommendation letters from primary teachers that you've had throughout your college experience, preferably those that you've had in your junior or your senior year. Preferably junior year if you can, or someone who's known you for a long time in your high school experience, and then also a recommendation from your counselor, which is different from the one from your teacher in that it's more of like an umbrella overview into like, what has this student done? I've observed this student throughout their time of college, and they've gotten really good grades, and they've been involved in so many ways. So the teacher one is more personal to like, how is the student in the classroom, and the counselor one is more of like an umbrella overview. So first things first, it's really hard if you go to a public school to have a good relationship with your counselor. I know this, and I had to fight for my relationship with my counselor because counselors are overworked. They have so many students, and it's really hard for you to form a relationship. But if you have to get in the counselor's office and introduce yourself and tell them about yourself and what you're passionate about and what your dreams are, and make it known that you're not here to play. Because most students, like, they don't actually take that initiative, and counselors get really overwhelmed with like the seniors every year, but you can really make that different if you get to know your counselor as early as possible. So if you're a freshman and a sophomore, now is the time to be having conversations with your counselor about what you want to do and what kind of support you need, so that throughout your high school experience, if you need any help, they'll be there for you, but also when they come to write that recommendation letter for you, they know you, they know what you've been involved in, and they can actually craft something that is not just like generic, but very personal. So when the college admissions officers read it, they're like, okay, this counselor knows the student and what their potential is.
Yeah, and the other thing too, though, is that let's say maybe it's later for you, you're a junior or a senior in college, that's okay too. So for example, for me, for my freshman and sophomore years, I attended the Islamic Study Academy / King Abdullah Academy respectively. And then afterwards, for my junior and senior years, I was at Edison High School. So the things that mattered for me was really focusing in my junior and senior year on creating these relationships that I didn't have the opportunity to do my first 2 years of high school because I wasn't there. So for my counselor, I would set up regular meetings with him where I would talk to him about, oh, this is what I'm interested in. I have questions about this. Or like, this is what I'm planning on doing. This is what I'm planning on taking for the next semester. It's up to you to take that initiative because like counselors are only going to remember the people who they interact with a lot. So you have to be someone who makes sure that you're active about this. The other thing too is crafting relationships with your teachers. So a lot of people who go to the same school for all 4 years have the opportunity to take multiple classes with the teacher. For me, what was important to me is that I made sure that I stood out in these classes. So the classes that I really cared about, or the classes that I was really good in, like making sure that the teacher knew what type of a student I was. what I was passionate about, what I cared about, so that they'd be able to write a good recommendation letter for me. And this is something that you can also do through your extracurriculars. So for example, or sorry, not your extracurriculars, but like, you know how there are some classes in high school that you can take that are like more optional. So other than math and English and stuff, you can also take classes that you like care more about. So for example, for some people that's like coding classes or computer science classes. For me, those were like the more political classes. So I took like IB Global Politics as one of my electives, or like I took like additional history classes and stuff like that. And then there's also a misconception, I think, that you have to get like one science or math teacher and one English or like reading teacher to write your recommendation letters. That's not true at all. I actually got one from my, he taught me for 3 classes, so I took history class with him, and I took global politics, and I took a second history class with him. And then I got one from my English teacher from 11th grade as well. And so both of those were essentially from like the social sciences, but that was perfectly fine, and that ended up getting me into the colleges that I got into. So what's important is not necessarily that like you do one math and one like reading, but what's important is actually that you have a good relationship with this teacher, that they know what type of a student that you are, and that they're able to write you like a good long letter that's not generic, but rather something that's like, it tells the schools who you